In late 2025, Peacock released a series called All Her Fault. So I'm a little bit late to the party, but recently screened it. Wanted to share my thoughts. I did know about the series, I just didn't get a chance to complete watching it until recently. So it's a fairly easy binge, just 8 episodes, and it centers around a well-off young suburban married couple, played by Sarah Snook, who people might remember as Shiv on HBO's Succession, and Jake Lacey, who has been featured on The Office and White Lotus. Jay Ellis, who many of us know as Lawrence from Insecure, he plays the main character Marissa. He plays her best friend. So Marissa is played by Sarah Snook, and he plays her best friend and her colleague. Like they are co-owners of a firm. And it also features Michael Pena, who is just one of those actors who's been in a lot of films, and if you see him, you recognize him, highly recognizable. Um, and also Abby Elliott, who plays the main characters on The Bear. She plays the main character's sister on The Bear. So it has a really great cast, great story, definitely worth tuning into. But from the standpoint of representation, it was very problematic in how it showcased the one African American featured character, Colin Dobbs, who is played by Jay Ellis. So the story begins when Marissa goes to retrieve her son from a play date with the son of one of the other moms in the area. That mom, her name is Jenny, and she's played by Dakota Fanning. When Marissa arrives, the woman who answers the door has no idea who she is. She doesn't know anything about her son. The son is about 4 years old. So she, of course, starts to panic, and she soon realizes that the text she received letting her know the address to go pick him up wasn't actually from Jenny, although in the text itself, the person identifies themselves as Jenny. The number isn't saved in her phone. She then calls Jenny and then calls everyone, and no one knows where her son is. I don't remember exactly how she got Jenny's number at that point, but she did. So, anyway, this is all taking place in the typical upscale suburban neighborhood, with great schools, lots of self involved rich people. Marissa is written as she's, part of this group of people, this community, but more relatable. And the same can be said about Jenny. So, very quickly, Marissa realizes that it's Jenny's nanny who has taken her son, but knows that the nanny must have had help from one or more other people in the community or even from in her own home. She first suspects her own nanny of helping Jenny to take her son. So after all the phone calls, the action cuts to Marissa's stylish home, where a lot of the action eventually unfolds throughout the series. Here we meet Colin, played by Jay Ellis, and she mentions that he is her best friend. Her husband's brother, who has a disability that makes him need a wheelchair or some other assistance for mobility, is also there, as is her husband's sister, who we later learn has something to do with maybe causing the disability in the first place. And there are lots of plot twists around that. The show is posh, it's engaging, it's interesting, it's well acted, but it does falter badly in the way in which it presents Colin, and it tokenizes him unnecessarily. Like I mentioned, we only learn that Colin is Marissa's best friend and colleague after the action moves to the house. And we see everyone sitting around shocked and in despair over the missing toddler. But we don't see Marissa calling him and telling him about the disappearance before he arrives at her house. Now, when we do see Colin on screen, he is physically there, but the action and the dialogue are happening all around him, and he barely has one line. I always wonder how actors put up with that sort of thing, but then I remember this scenario actually plays out on lots of different types of jobs every day, and no one says a thing. But I digress. So that is one opportunity that the writers, I think, threw away to draw or show the relationship between Marissa and Colin and bring the character into the story in a meaningful way and not tokenize him. And when I see these things on screen, sometimes I wonder if the writers are being passive aggressive, as if they actually didn't want the actor to be there. And I think it would have been more dramatically effective if there was a short scene before Marissa got home or before Colin arrived of Marissa being devastated over the phone and telling Colin what happened, because it would both dramatize the closeness and the significance of her relationship with Colin, and the audience would have been given the opportunity to see his reaction, humanizing him. But instead, we see Colin in the scene with Marissa and her husband and his siblings, but not of the scene, if you get what I'm saying. One thing TV shows have often done in what I like to call the golden age of TV and film diversity, which I believe began in America around 2012, is reconfigure stock types into something else when they're being played by black actors. For example, shows where characters would normally be endgame or have a romantic relationship or both are not written that way. Or black actresses in lead roles, for instance, often end up being written more as supporting characters, and the white supporting characters end up getting more agency, more interiority, more point of view, more humanity. And so we saw the same thing with All Her Fault. Remember, Colin is the main character's best friend. In flashback, we see that Marissa and Jenny have met only once or twice before the action of the show starts. They did bond with each other in a brief exchange in the bathroom at a party. And although they seem like the other snooty, narcissistic, competitive, political rich moms, they are more relatable. They laugh when they show up at the same fancy event in the same dress. But when the action of the series begins, that's about as far as their friendship has gone. I mean, there is no friendship. When Jenny realizes her nanny likely had something to do with the missing child, she is devastated, and she deals with guilt. But she also feels compassion for Marissa and reaches out despite warnings from the other people in their Chicago suburb and even from her own husband to keep her distance, since they believe that Marissa is bound to lash out at her eventually. What happens, however, is that Marissa comes to lean on Jenny, and the audience gets Jenny's point of view. We learn about the complicated dynamics of Jenny's marriage. We get to see Jenny being a mom in her home. We're brought into her home. We're brought into her workplace. We're brought into her entire career. And it's her shoulder that Marissa leans on again and again, not Colin's. He isn't emotionally foregrounded in the crisis. His insights do not drive the plot. His point of view is missing, even though all the other characters get one. When he is somewhat interiorized, it's a chimera, it's a ruse, it's a bamboozling of the audience, because we realize very soon that it's actually about developing another character, a white character. We learn through dialogue, not action on the screen, that Colin has a gambling problem and that he perpetrated fraud at his workplace to pay his gambling debts. He interacts with sketchy people because of this gambling problem. So to me, that brings in other issues of stereotypes and the black person representing danger, crime, dishonesty, even within a milieu that is supposed to be fairly upper class. And it's a problem not because there shouldn't be shady people depicted on screen, but in the historical context of how black people have been represented and the fact that the only black character in the series does make it an issue. When we find out about a relationship Colin is in, it's with someone who's not at his level economically, then that character drives home the point by making, um, by mocking his love of classical music. And so it's kind of like he's elevated and taken down a peg at the same time, right? So it's like, what are we doing here? So to say Colin's character was written poorly would be to give the writers too much credit because his character wasn't written at all. He was literally there as sort of an empty vessel just to advance the storylines of the other characters. All the writers poured energy into developing and humanizing the Jenny character for no real payoff, and what eventually happened to Colin would have made much more sense from the standpoint of dramatic impact if those events visited Jenny instead. So Colin was actually written as a minor character and Jenny as the supporting character, though he was supposedly the one with the long standing friendship with Marissa and her family, including her son. And yeah, there was some sort of friction between Colin and Marissa's husband, but none of that rose to the level of where the character should have been written with such incredible emotional distance from the story. In All Her Fault, Colin is stylish, he's smart, polished, upper class, loyal, but not written as a real participant in the emotional engine of the show. He's in the room, but not in the story. And again, this might strike a familiar chord for some regarding our own workplace dynamics. So, All Her Fault repeats a troubling pattern in TV dramas and films of the golden age of diversity. They give the black character proximity, but not presence. And yes, this happened prior to this era, but the very fact that we entered a new era of diversity in TV and film was supposed to mean that we made meaningful headway in representation, that we were supposed to be past token characters. But here's a show debuting in late 2025 with such a piss poor depiction of what could have been and should have been a much stronger character. I remember learning about the times in the golden age of Hollywood when movies starring people like Lena Horne were outright and intentionally written, directed, and edited in such a way that they could easily cut out all the scenes of the black actors in the show to show the film in the segregated South and not impact any story continuity. Well, the same can often be said of many mainstream TV and film today with featured black actors, which are supposed to be featuring black actors. You could cut out every scene and that they're in, and there's no real impact on any aspect of the story. So, unfortunately, All Her Fault is one of those. So, This channel is called Scene and Substance, Character Through Culture. And regardless of the quality of the production, I still think that we can often challenge ourselves to use many of these stories for personal growth by engaging with the themes and the issues that they bring up, whether intended by the story or not. So, this is a show that made me think about the relationships that are supposed to be friendships, but maybe we're being gaslit into thinking so. What does it say about the character of a partner or friend if they want proximity to us but not accountability to us? And what further does it say about you as an individual who tolerates such a quote unquote friendship? At what point do you distance yourself from that person, and how do you do it? And of course, this particular series brings up the question of interracial friendships between black and white people. As a black person, you might want to consider, am I a person to them, or am I a symbol? Am I just an accessory for diversity to elevate their moral standing? Or am I someone whose emotional interiority is valued? So these are a few of the questions that came up for me as I thought about this series, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. So thank you for listening, and please comment and hit like and subscribe for more.